Okay, grab your Bibles. We are going back to the book of 1 Kings. We took a couple weeks off for Easter week, Easter season. Before that, we were in 1 Kings chapter 13. Greg did a fantastic job laying out 1 Kings 13. We've been talking about, for the first 10 chapters of 1 Kings was the rise of Israel. This united kingdom that David has handed off to Solomon, and Solomon has ruled, and it has become the peak, the pinnacle of Israel. Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, except for Jesus. The wisest man has got all these things. He's put in order. We see the absolute breadth and depth and just the well-workingness of this kingdom. It has been fantastic to see it. The Israelites have seen this. They've gone back, but yet now we are in the decline. Now we knew this wasn't going to be all good rainbows and butterflies for the rest of the book. John and I have been straight up front since the beginning of this, that this is really going to be, we're going to see the point, the pinnacle, the absolute thing that the Israelites want to go back to. And yet, at the same time, we're going to see almost 400 years of the downfall of Israel into exile, into slavery, into being conquered. And so really today, it's the beginning of the end. We're in chapter 14, and we will probably get through 14, but we might also get through chapter 16. So that just tells you what my notes are like. Because chapters 15 and 16 kind of repeat 14 in a lot. 14 is about a couple kings, but then you get to 15 and 16. There are 8 kings in chapters 15 and 16 alone. So there's a lot going on here. There's going to be a lot of succession. We're really going to see a rapid decline of Israel, a rapid decline of Judah. This is not going to be good. It's only going to get progressively worse, in fact. At this point, Jeroboam is king in the north, and Rehoboam is king in the south. Remember that Israel was divided up into 2 sections, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. So they're divided into this, and they are split. There is war between the north and the south. There is hostility between the north and the south. Even though they are brothers and sisters, they are still God's chosen people, the country, the people of Israel. There is hostility. There are things going on, and we're going to see the progression of kings. So as you read in your Bibles, there's going to be a lot of names. Some of these people, as we're going to see a king in chapter 16, his name is, I want to make sure I get this right, because they all have really easy names. His name is Zimri. He's going to rule for a total of 7 days. But yet he makes it in there. He was one of the kings in Israel. He's one of the kings, actually I should make sure it's in Israel. One of the kings in Israel. So we're going to see progressions. So it's not important. I should be careful how I phrase this. Names are important, but we're going to see a lot of names. We have some kind of list handout if that would help you keep track of the kings and the order of the kings. But what I want to propose today, what I want to talk about today going forward, is that we're not going to spend and digest every single name the way we do as we're going to when we have been doing. But we want to propose a theme. This is how it's going to be happening. We're going to talk about the names, we're going to talk about the kings, but there's going to be a theme. There's going to be a spiraling downfall. It's going to be continually getting worse and worse and worse. But it's going to be due to the same types of sins, the same types of problems, and it's going to be the same type of problem in the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. We're going to continually see this again and again and again. Kings fall over and over and over again. In fact, I don't think there is a good king in the north ever. There's all bad kings, and they all say they were worse than the father before them, and the fathers before them. Remember months ago I said that's going to be one of the themes that we're going to pick up in Kings, is that they were, and the fathers and the fathers and the fathers before them. We're going to see the generations. We're going to see people continually going the way that is wrong. The southern kingdom has a few good kings, but nothing that redeems them, nothing that brings them back to a point where they're going to be saved from their exile. We are seeing the beginning of the end. So the main problem is that they have lost their first and true love. Now I say that Interestingly, I'm quoting actually from the book of Revelation. That's what one of the letters to the churches in Revelation says, that you have lost your true love, your first love. And what he's referring to is you have lost your love of Jesus. And I think that's the problem with Israel and Judah. They have lost their true, they have lost their original love. They're capturing their worship of God Almighty. We're not that far removed in 1 Samuel where they were given the kingdom. God led them in victory. They were starting to rule. They were starting to grow. We're only 3 chapters removed from Solomon being the ruling king of an absolute rich and glorious kingdom of Israel. 3 chapters removed. And here we are in an absolute treacherous situation in the north and the south kingdoms. Because they've lost their true love. They do not know what they worship. They don't worship what they think they should worship. They don't worship what they know. They are worshiping what they love. But they don't love what they should love. Does that make sense? Maybe this is the way to put it. I was reading a book, and they were talking about a place that they visited. And I'll talk about this because I visited the same place. And it's a place that is very worshipful. It's full of worship. And if you walk in there, it's got huge walls, vaulted ceilings, glass everywhere. There's setup is great. The welcome is, you walk in, there's just a huge space to move around. You can wander around. You can engage with all sorts of different people and all sorts of different things. There are all sorts of stuff that are pulling you in. They want you to engage in what's going on in that place. It's subtly trying to shape and mold us that say, this is what you need. This is what will help. This is what will help you to love better. It sounds like an amazing, huge, majestic thing of worship, right? You know what the place is called? The Mall of America. The Mall of America. But yet we don't think of it that way, do we? We don't think of it as a place of worship. We think of it as a place where we shop. And now I'm not saying we should ban, that's not what I'm saying. It's fine to shop, fine to things. But at the same time, we must recognize what it's doing to our hearts. Because I don't think Israel just woke up one day and says, you know what? I want to worship a bunch of wood statues instead. I don't think that was an overnight thing. I think we're seeing the steady decline into a worship of something that's wrong, into a worship of things that are idols. Have you guys ever wrestled with that? Maybe it's just me. I always wonder, I just don't think, how could I ever worship something that I made? I would just have a really hard time with that. I can't see myself going in the garage and carving a statue and then worshiping it. I just can't see myself doing that. So I wrestled with this idea of idolatry because I don't feel like I have idols. That's just what I've been thinking. But then I started reading and I started thinking about this book and all these things that I worship. And it's like, well, yeah, I didn't make it with my own hands. I didn't carve it with tools. But yet, when I get that magazine in the mail, my mind gets very distracted over the things that I want. Or the things that I think that I need. And it's like, oh, yeah, it's probably just harmless, and it's fine to have things that I want, that I love to hunt, I love to fish, I love to add things that help me do that better, because I enjoy that. I worship God in that. But yet, at the same time, it is slowly, subtly, inch by inch, moving me from a complete, awesome, completely dedicated love of God into, I love Jesus, but I also love this. And we worship what we love. And this is the ultimate problem in the book of Kings. They don't talk about the military battles and the military victories of Jeroboam or any of the kings. There are some in there. But the primary discussion, the primary points in the book of Kings that we're going to see throughout all of the kings is going to be the Bible's addressing the lack and the wrongful worship of Yahweh. The wrongful worship of God. They continue to address that. So we're going to jump into that with Jeroboam. We'll touch back on it. So why don't you read with me? We're going to pick it up in chapter 14, verse 1. And at that time, Abijah, the son of Jeroboam, fell sick. And Jeroboam said to his wife, "Arise, disguise yourself, that it is not known that you are the wife of Jeroboam, and go to Shiloh. Behold, Ahijah the prophet is there, who said of me that I should be king over the people. Take with you 10 loaves, some cakes, a jar of honey, and go to him, and he will tell you what shall happen to the child." So here we are visiting again. Ahijah the prophet, 2 chapters ago, he meets Jeroboam on the road, tears his cloak, and says, pick these tribes up, because these are the tribes that you are going to rule when Solomon is gone. Okay, this is the same prophet. So now time has passed. We're going to see in just a little bit that Ahijah is older, and Jeroboam is somehow smart enough in all of his oldness, I'm not going to go myself. I know that I can't go because Ahijah will recognize, because Jeroboam knows he's not living the life he should be. So he's going to send his wife, and this is what's so interesting, he's going to send his wife in disguise. This is not the first time in the Bible this has happened. I think this is so interesting. There are other accounts where people have disguised themselves, and you know what? It never, ever works. It never works, because we're going to see Ahijah does not see with the sight of man, because Ahijah is actually physically blind. We're going to see that Ahijah sees with the sight of God. So Jeroboam's wife did so. And no one ever asks, why did she have to disguise herself? Is she that disliked? Is something going on that she has to disguise herself on the way to Ahijah the prophet? I'm speculating. We don't know. She arose, went to Shiloh, came to the house of Ahijah. Now Ahijah could not see, for his eyes were dim because of his age. And the Lord said to Ahijah, behold, the wife of Jeroboam is coming to inquire of you concerning her son, for he is sick. Thus and thus you shall say to her. So the Lord is saying, this is what's going to happen. She's going to come. She's going to think you're fooling you. She's going to try to fool you with her disguise. But here's what you're going to say. Exactly what you're going to say. Now you can see that this story is shaping up, I think, really, really incredibly. Because on all of this, and all the deception, all the guys, Jeroboam is playing his kingly trump card, he thinks. He's got power. He's used to getting his way. He's used to being able to manipulate the system. At the same time, he's like, here, you go disguised as this. He's not going to know. He's old. Bring him some cakes and some honey. He's going to be happy. He'll probably say something, and hopefully he'll save my son. But the Lord, Jeroboam is not king. Jeroboam is not in charge. God is in charge. God is sovereign. So when she came, she pretended to be another woman. And this lasted for probably 4 seconds. But when Ahijah heard the sound of her feet as she came in the door, he said, come in, wife of Jeroboam. Why do you pretend to be another? For I am charged with unbearable news for you. Well, that's a great welcome. That's not Minnesotan at all. There's no offering of coffee. Come on in. I know you're the wife. Why are you disguised? I have unbearable news for you. This has got to be coming. They have to have avoided Ahijah. I have to think that Jeroboam has avoided this prophet for as long as he possibly can. He had a run-in with him last chapter where Ahijah warns him again to follow the commands of the Lord, to follow the law of the Lord, to follow his love, to follow God, what he has set before him to follow it as the king. And the rest of the nation has been following in idolatry, in wrongful worship. Verse 7 says, go tell Jeroboam, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, because I exalted you from among the people and made you leader over my people and tore the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you. That's literally the picture that Ahijah did. He tore up his cloak. And yet you have not been like my servant David, who kept my commandments and followed me with all of his heart, doing only which was right in my eyes. But you have done evil above all who were before you, and have gone and made for yourself other gods and metal images, provoking me to anger, and have cast me behind your back. That is a grim and very truthful statement. And to hear that, Jeroboam's wife does not speak in this entire account. She has no words. But to hear the piercing truth, you got to wonder what it was like. Was it in some ways freeing to know that all of this, the lies and the covering up and the sin? Because if we stop and think about sin for a little bit, remember, we've had those, or maybe we haven't, I don't know, where sin is in our life and we have to work at keeping it hidden. We have to work at keeping it under the mask. We have to work at keeping it reasonable, where we can reason our way that it is logical, that it's not good, but we still can do this. You know what that is? It's exhausting. So part of me wonders if this knowledge to his wife was somehow at all a burden being released, even if it's horrible, unbearable news. It's been exposed. It's been brought to front. I can no longer live in the lie that Jeroboam has been leading Israel astray for decades. They've been allowing the high places to be yet another places of worship, where the idols have been, where idols have become rampant among the country, among Jeroboam, among his household. That the love of Yahweh, they probably know about God. Obviously, he's sending his wife to inquire the prophets of God. So it's not that he has forgotten God. It's not that he stopped believing in God, but his heart has been totally captured in worship of something else. Something else. And I can only think, and we can see from timeline, it's only going to get worse. That when we continually give pieces of ourselves, even if it's just small pieces, to things that desire worship, that form us, even if it's something we don't even realize what's happening. That's why I like that story of the mall, because we walk by these places and we see the glass images and we walk by the clothes stores and we say, and they're teaching me subconsciously. They're somehow implying to me that I need that to have the good life. I need that to make myself feel worthy. I need that to find my identity in something that makes me feel valuable. And slowly I have been transformed. That's where my heart needs to go. Well, if I really need to feel the way that I feel, then I need to have this to justify the way that I feel. And now it sounds horrible when I say it this way, but we never think that loud. We never think that way. We don't think it out loud. It's the subtle processing of just this will pull you in. Now, is there anything wrong with dressing nice? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying to beware that they're always teaching us to desire the things that are not our first and true and best love. It is something that seeps at us, something that grasps at us, something that can control us, something that takes our primary worship. So yes, it's very fitting that he is worthy, because who is worthy? Only one. Where was I? Verse 10. Therefore, behold, I will bring harm upon the house of Jeroboam, and I will cut from Jeroboam every male, both bond and free in Israel, and will burn up the house of Jeroboam as man burns up dung until it is all gone. Anyone belonging to Jeroboam who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat, and anyone who dies in the open country, the birds of the heaven shall eat, for the Lord has spoken it. This is not a good prophecy. This is not a good what's going to happen. It's just not going to be great for Jeroboam. And what we're going to see is the progression of the line of Jeroboam, of the kings in Israel, are going to be many and short. Many and short. We're only 100 or 200 years away from exile in Israel. This is just the beginning. This is horrible. This is bad, but we have to remember that this is only going to get worse. Man, that's super cheery this morning, Joel. It's just like the wind. You're just sucking all the fun out of it. Moreover, the Lord will raise up for himself a king over Israel who shall cut off the house of Jeroboam today. And henceforth, and this is important because here's the prophecy talking about exile. The Lord will strike Israel as a reed is shaken in the water, and root up Israel out of the good land that he gave to their fathers, and scatter them beyond the Euphrates, because they have made their Asherim, provoking the Lord to anger. And he will give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he sinned and made Israel to sin. Constantly going back to the idols. Now, I've been doing a little bit of reading about idolatry this week, because it wasn't something that it was like a historical thing. Like, oh, that's what Israel did. And yeah, I can see that my heart gets captured or distracted sometimes in the things of the world. But what makes idolatry powerful? Like, I still wrestle with this fact. Like, how can they have this thing that they made that looks like a goat or a calf? Remember, Jeroboam had just set up 2 more golden calves. You think he would have learned, because it didn't work well for Aaron in Exodus. When they made a golden calf, Moses made them drink the gold powder in the water. So we think that should be a clear enough sign that don't do that. But he sets up 2 of them in Israel, one in the north and one in the south, so that people can worship this golden calf. And yet, I just have a hard time. Like, my logical brain is, why would I do that? I know that's just a thing. I know that thing doesn't have power. But that's where the trick is. That's what makes idolatry interesting. Is because idolatry is things that you are giving power. It's that you are giving them the power. It's not that they are demanding it. It's not that they are taking it because they aren't worthy of it. God is so worthy in his holy, other, omnipotent, powerful self that he demands glory because it is his. He demands worship because he is worthy. There is no one else worthy. There's no one else who can demand the worship, the worthiness, the praise, the power, the things that we give to God, because he's the only one who is worthy of that. For that calf, for that idol, for that thing in our lives to have any power at all, we have to give it willingly to them and make them take it. Think about that for an instant. I think that's so interesting. We are giving them the power over ourselves to rule us because we think it's going to be better. We think if I do this, then they will help me want what I actually want. And at the core of that, if we take even a step further back, we're saying, God, I know what I need better than you know what I need. And that's interesting. That's getting at some core level desires. Going back to, what do you love? Because again, we're letting what we love, what we want, control what we worship. Because if I want something, I can create something that will be a God to me, that I will love, that I will worship, and that will have power over me because I think in the end of the days it will give me what I want. What I want to make me be me, what I want to make me feel happy. And now we start thinking about this, it seems so deceptive. Because it is. And how could I fall into something so obvious? Because this is subtle. Because it is over time. Because it is step by step. Giving things here and there. Oh no, it's just I still love God. I still love the God who has led my people and been all my ancestors. But for this moment, I'm really having a hard time. My field isn't growing well, so I'm going to sacrifice to something that will maybe help my field get better. So therefore I can give to this, and therefore it'll help me this. But God, you're still my main guy. But over here it's going to help me with this, just one little thing. And that's a big step in itself. But the subtlety of it over time, of that I am controlling what I worship. I'm controlling how things are doing because I want the things that I want to want. That actually made sense. But yet when we throw ourselves and our life and our worship in God who is truly God, who is the worthy God, the only one, he not only knows what's better for me, he does what is best for me, and he does what is necessary for me. And that's what we're going to see in the book of Kings, that even though the book of Kings is somber at times, somber, yeah, you're like, Joel, that's depressing. The reason this happens is because God is doing what is necessary for the hearts of those whom he loves. I will rip them out of the land that I have given them, out of their comfortability. I will put them into exile, because after they come out of exile, and we're already going to see hints of it if we read the prophets alongside these stories in Kings, we're going to see that yes, there is destruction coming. Yes, there is exile coming. But at the end of almost all of them, there is this, but I will bring them back. I will begin to already working to return them to myself. To begin to work in such a way that I will do what is necessary to capture their hearts for what is important, not for what they think is important, because what is absolutely necessary is a heart after God. So we have a God that doesn't do things because he is vindictive. We don't have a God that does things because he is mean and he wants to get back at us because we have worshiped other gods. We have a God who is doing something that is necessary to capture my heart because he knows my heart is sick and he has the cure. That's an impressive God, that he will orchestrate not just things in my life, but he will orchestrate countries and world leaders to capture the hearts of those who he loves. That's an incredibly powerful and sovereign God. And yet, the people of Israel, and we're going to read about Judah, continued to turn their backs on him. Verse 17, then Jeroboam's wife arose, departed, and came to Tirzah, and as she came to the threshold of the house, the child died, and all of Israel buried him and mourned him, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by the servant Ahijah. Now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he warred and how he reigned, how they were written in the book of Chronicles and the Kings of Israel. The book of Kings basically are saying, you want to read about that stuff? Fine. This book is about the heart. This book is about the wrongful worship of something else. All the things that Jeroboam did, all the striving after the wind, the things that his father said not to do in Ecclesiastes, They don't even get recorded here because they aren't worth it. What is worth it? Following God. We get to Rehoboam. So Jeroboam was in the northern kingdom of Israel. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, is in Judah. Now we're going to kind of skip a bit because some of these next few chapters are going to be a lot of the same cycle. Okay? So I don't know. I told John when he left, I said, I might get through 14. I might get through 16. You have permission to cover 14, 15, 16, do whatever you want. Because we don't know where we're going to, it's just how much do we want to recover of this? How much do we want to go in? So as you read along with us, I hope that you're reading ahead as well. Rehoboam reigned in Judah, and he was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem. Okay, now skip down to verse 25. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, you're going to see that Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem. So there's war going on in the north. There's war going on between the kingdoms. There's war going on from the south. Egypt is coming up and capturing a dozen cities in Judah. Lots of cities. They have come and caused lots of problems. And Egypt is going to be a major player through the rest of the book in Judah. They're going to constantly be a threat, pushing them around when Assyria is going to come in from the north and Babylon's going to come in from the east, and they're going to continue to capture this. But Egypt's always there in the south, causing issues. And what's so interesting here is, remember back 3-4 chapters ago when Solomon had so much gold, so many millions and millions of dollars coming in every year, and he had so much gold that he was making gigantic shields that he was putting around Israel to show the glory and the splendor of Israel that God has given them? We're going to see that stripped away here. Rehoboam, son of Solomon, it says, he took away the treasures, this is verse 26, of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house. He took away everything. He took away all the shields of gold that Solomon had made, and King Rehoboam made in their place shields of bronze. 4 chapters ago, silver was as common as rocks. And now I have to resort to making shields of bronze. And these shields aren't even for decoration. These shields aren't even declaring the splendor. These shields are functional. These shields are only taken off the wall to defend King Rehoboam when he walks about. We have fallen far, 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 far in not a short amount of time, in a very short amount of time. This is the decline. This is what's going on. And there is rampant wickedness. There's rampant idolatry worship. There's rampant giving power to things because I think that they're going to benefit me more than I think God will benefit me. Because I think I'm going to make them worthy of worship even though they are absolutely not. Okay, so here's where we're going to fly a little bit. So you ready? I'm just going to give you an overview. So we have Abijam in Judah. So that's the southern kingdom. He's going to reign after Rehoboam dies. And after Abijam dies, we have Asa. Now Asa is a somewhat okay king. He still leaves some of the high places up there, but he doesn't take them, but he still tries to follow Yahweh, follow God with his heart. But it doesn't work. His reforms aren't complete, and he dies. Again, talk about the cycle. After Jeroboam dies, we have his son Nadab, who reigns in Israel. If you see Israel, think of the northern kingdom. If you see Judah, you think of the southern kingdom. Now, he doesn't last real long because Jeroboam's prophecy wasn't real good. So he didn't last long. And then we have Baasha, who reigned after him. And now he didn't last long. And we have Elah in Israel. This is, again, we're already in chapter 16. And if you read chapters 15 and 16, it's going to say the same types of things, except for Asa. And they followed just like their father and did the wicked things against God, and they were worse than every other person before them. And then they died. And then it's the next king. It continually spiraling downward. Then we get Zimri. Remember the guy who reigns for 7 days? Until they have another guy named Omri, who reigns for a little bit longer of time. And then in Israel, after this, we get to possibly the worst king of them all, which we will cover more in detail because the rest of 1 Kings is significantly about King Ahab. Okay? So, you go read through this, see some of the things where you're going to see the continually downward spiraling pattern in Israel and Judah. That they continue to seek the things that are wicked. They continue to seek the things that they want. They continue to chase after things that aren't their first love, their true love, their best love. Continue to worship things and to give them power and try to make them worthy of worship when they are obviously not. we'll continue down this as we go in here. So Mary, as you guys and your team gets up here, I want to close with a section of 1 Peter. And I love Peter's bluntness. He goes, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope." Now I love that words. I love those words, living hope. Living, obviously, because he's not a thing. He's not an object. He's not something that we made or manufactured, but he is a living God. He is not dead. He even tried to kill him. He couldn't stay dead. He is living. But living also means he is active. He is pursuing us. He is out for us. He is extending grace upon grace and mercy upon mercy in spite of Israel and their continually downward wickedness. He continues to extend grace. And we have this living hope through the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. That's why we make a big deal of Easter. It's the power of God to resurrect life, to bring us out of a life that is dead in sin and to resurrect us as a life found in Jesus. I don't know if it's the weather, if it's the week. I'm exhausted. It's just been the week it is. I don't know what it has. I had 3 cups of coffee and I still can't seem to wake up. And as I'm working on this all week and I continually wrestle with this, and I feel like I really wrestled hard, and I feel like that was part of the lesson for me. Why are you trying to do this on your own? Are you trying to make something? Am I trying to help myself help God? Am I trying to give an idol out of my own work when I should just trust God to do what God does? It's kind of a challenging moment for me this week to trust in him who is bigger than I'll let him be sometimes. So, if you have questions, let's talk. We'll see you guys next week.